Hi, and welcome to today's big lesson, which is solving linear equations. So today is a big deal. We finally get to actually solve an equation for the first time. We've spent a lot of time kind of talking about skills and working our way in order for us to get to this point. So I have a little how-to, a little step-by-step procedure here on some general strategies on solving linear equations, but there are just so many linear equations. This is just a general guidelines. You may not have to do some of these steps in order to move on to the next one, but it is helpful to kind of have these in your idea or have these in your brain as almost tools in your math toolbox. So I'm just going to read them and then we're going to solve a bunch of equations. So step one, simplify each side using the equation as much as possible. So distributive property is always a good one to try to remove the parentheses, combining like terms. Those are the kind of things you want to do. Step two is you want to collect all the variables on one side of the equation by using the addition or subtraction property. At the same time, step three, collect all the constants terms on one side of the equation. So again, addition or subtraction property of equality. Step four, make the coefficient of the variable term to equal 1. So we want to try to have the number in front of the variable be 1. So how do we actually do that? By using multiplication or division property of equality. And then you want to go ahead and solve the equation. And then the final last step, the beauty of solving equations is that when you get your solution, you can check it by plugging it back into the original. So here we go. Get excited. The first thing that I always like to kind of do is for the equations, I kind of like to highlight or circle where the variable is. Okay. That gives us an idea of what it is that we need to look for. So that's kind of a good first step. Okay. Let me grab. Okay. So I'm going to, first things first, we want to try and isolate. We don't have anything to simplify, so we're not doing step one, but we want to try and get that variable term by itself. We want to get this 7x by itself, which means to say we need to get rid of this constant term, 8. So because it's plus 8, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to do an additive inverse. And the additive inverse of 8 is negative 8. So essentially, we're going to subtract 8 from both sides. And when I say both sides, I'm talking about both sides of the equal sign. So sometimes students find it helpful to kind of circle the equal sign and draw a line through it just to keep ourselves organized. And again, the goal is to create additive inverses. So then I'm left with 7x is equal to, and then we're doing negative 13 minus 8. What that means that we're doing is we have two numbers that are negative, so 13 really plus 8, and we're making sure the answer is negative, so negative 21. Now, the operation between a coefficient and the variable is always multiplication, which means to say we need to undo the order of operations. We need to undo multiplication. We need to do a multiplicative inverse, which means to say the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 7, which is going to cancel out. 7 divided by 7 is 1, which is great because now we're able to say that it's 1x or just x because the 1 can be like an imaginary one. And that's our goal. And then we do negative 21 divided by 7, which gives me a negative 3. So that's our answer. Now, let's go ahead and try to check that this is correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the answer that I got, which was, and I don't like, there we go. The answer that I got, which was negative 3 into my x variable. And then I'm going to add 8, and I want to make sure that that equals negative 13. So let's go ahead and do orders of operations. So 7 times negative 3 is negative 21, and we have to add 8, and we want that, and I'm going to put like a question mark here because we don't know if that actually is indeed equal to negative 13. Negative 18 plus 8 is actually negative 13. So that is correct. We did do this problem correctly. Okay. Let's do another simple one, and then let's start trying to do some more complex ones. I'm going to skip this one because this problem and actually 9x equals 8x minus 6 is very similar. Now notice where the variables are. I actually, in this case, have 2 variables, okay? And that means that I need to get the variables on the same side. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add or subtract some of these in order to get it to the same side. And since I already have 9x already by itself, I'm going to try to move this 8x over to the other side. And the way that I'm going to do it is by, again, doing an additive inverse. This is positive 8x, which means to say I am going to subtract. Oops. There we go. I'm actually going to subtract 8x from both sides. And again, if you need to circle and kind of draw a little line down to help us out, you're more than welcome to do that. The 8x cancel out. And then we just add 9x minus 8x, which happens to give us x, is equal to negative 6. So we actually solved it pretty quickly. Let's check our answer. Let's plug negative 6 back into the original. So I have 9 times negative 6, and that's going to be equal to 8 times negative 6, and then we are going to subtract 6. Okay, so 9 times negative 6 is negative 54. And then we have 8 times negative 6, which is negative 64. I'm sorry, not 64, 48. And then we're subtracting 6 from that. So now negative 54, we go ahead and do negative 48 minus 6, which is indeed negative 54. So we are correct. We did this problem right. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and do the next problem. Again, if you need to continue to highlight where your variables are, please be sure you do that. Okay, there is no shame in doing that. And also, if you need to also kind of circle that equal sign and mark it all the way down just to keep yourself organized, also be sure to do that. I'm actually going to go a little bit further up. Now, again, I have my 2 variables. I have 2 variables and they're on different sides of the equal sign. Now, I'm just going to move the 6x over to the other side by subtracting 6x, just kind of how we did before. And I'm just picking 6x. You could get the 7x over to the other side. That's completely okay. Now, 7x minus 6x is just x. And then you have to bring everything down. So that 5 is going to come straight down. So plus 5 is equal to, the 6x disappears, cancels out, and then I have 2. Now notice my x is not isolated. It is not by itself. I do have a coefficient of 1, but I still have that plus 5. So I need to get this plus 5 over to the other side. And the way I'm going to do that is an additive inverse. I'm going to subtract 5 because 5 minus 5 is 0, which is what we want. And I am just left with x is equal to negative 3. Again, we can check our answer. We do 7 times negative 3 plus 5 is equal to, sorry, I ran out of space, is equal to 6 times negative 3. And then we add 2. Okay, so 7 times negative 3 is negative 21 plus 5 is equal to 6 times negative 3, which is a negative 18, and we add 2. Negative 21 plus 5 is negative 16, and negative 18 plus 2 is negative 16. So we did this one correctly. Okay, so you can start kind of seeing a pattern here. This next one is pretty similar. I'm not gonna do actually either of these just because, or I'm not gonna do that one. I will do the next one, 7a minus 3 equals 13a plus 7, and you'll see why in a second. So again, I'm going to highlight just to stay consistent with what we have been doing. So notice I no longer have an x in here, I have a's, and that is okay, because as long as it is a variable, it doesn't matter what that variable is. So again, I'm going to circle, I'm going to do this imaginary dotted line, okay, and I am going to get something over to the other side. And in this case, I'm going to actually get that 7a over to the other side. And you could do it the other way around, that's fine. That is absolutely okay. So I'm going to subtract 7a from both sides, because 7a minus 7a cancels out, gives me 0, and then I have to drop down the negative 3. Then I have my equal sign, and I have 13a minus 7a. So I'm just doing 13 minus 7, which is 6a plus 7. So now I'm going to isolate the 6a. Notice this time my coefficient is not a 1. Okay, so I'm going to have to do an additional step at the end. But first, we have to take care of that 7. We want to only have one term on that side, and we want that one term to be 7a. So I'm going to cancel the 7 minus the 7, because that gives me 0. Those are additive inverses. And I have negative 10 is equal to 6a. Last but not least, we have to divide. We have to undo the multiplication of 6 times a. So the 6's cancel, and I'm just going to simplify this fraction. Negative 10 over 6 simplifies to negative 5 over 3. And that's going to be equal to our a value. Okay, so now my answer is a fraction, and that is 100% okay. Okay, that is 100% okay. We can go ahead and check it. I am running a little bit short on time here, so I'm going to go ahead and skip through a little bit. Notice these next two solving problems are going to be with fractions and with decimals. Okay, so you are going to have to do that for solving these. And I'm actually going to pause this video here, go into part 2 of this lesson, okay, so that we are able to really dive deep into some of the remainder of these problems.